Hi, I'm Kay Gilbert from the Tennis Parents Community, an award-winning support network of over 2,800 tennis parents whose children are playing tennis within the Great British system. Parents on the group have come together to share knowledge, experiences, and practical advice on how to best support their children in the sport. Every family's situation is different, not just the age and level of their child, but also their access to finances and time. The community helps parents to figure out what works best for them and to better understand the complexities of our sport. If you're a tennis parent based in the UK and not yet a member, then do please come and join us on Facebook and just search for the Tennis Parents Community. You'll also find us on Instagram, and our YouTube channel is full of recordings of helpful sessions like this one. These are available not just to parents, but also to coaches, volunteers, officials, and anyone internationally who wants to better understand the world of junior tennis. Now, this evening, we're really privileged to have Simon Pender joining us to share his wisdom and to answer your questions. Simon started his tennis journey in Cornwall, and his successful junior playing career led to a top 30 singles and a top 10 doubles ITF Junior World Ranking. That qualified for him for places to play in both the Junior French Open and Junior Wimbledon. He went on to gain a Junior Olympic medal as well as an ATP adult singles and doubles rankings before injury forced him to change direction. Simon's now a level 5 coach. He's worked in Cambridgeshire, Gloucestershire, Texas, as well as being national coach for the Southwest and then the LTA Talent Performance Manager for over 13 years. He's now director of tennis at Merchiston Boarding School in Edinburgh, which has a thriving boys' tennis academy. I'm really looking forward to learning from him as a coach with over 20 years' experience of developing talent programs that have identified and nurtured players, including Jack Draper, Katie Swan, Emma Raducanu, Kyle Edmund, Jonas Monday, and Jacob Fernley. And of course, we're all looking forward tonight to find out what he thinks is the right way to the top. Welcome to the Tennis Parents Community, Simon Pender.
Thank you, Kay. Welcome everyone. Really nice to be here tonight. I actually see an old friend of mine, I think, on the chat already, actually, Adam Wharf. So a blast from the past there. Yeah, really nice to be here and looking forward to it. Thank you, Kay.
No worries. Isn't that always the way in tennis that we bump into people we know wherever we go? And I always say never fall out with anyone in tennis because you're going to be standing next to them somewhere sometime soon.
Especially don't fall out with them on the court. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. Your playing career suddenly catches up with you as well, doesn't it? Well,
Yeah,
Simon, I
it
mentioned
does.
there in
It
your
does.
introduction that you started your playing journey in Cornwall. How did your parents support you as a young player?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back now, I think I don't know how I actually played tennis coming from Cornwall. I was from a very little village called Newlyn, which some people may know of, and um, I just ended up loving tennis through watching it on TV, but also through a PE teacher of mine at school. Um, and they supported me really, my parents, brilliantly, just by taking me everywhere. You have to remember, literally when you look at a map of Great Britain, I'm at the very, very end, right next to Land's End is where I went to school. So back in the day, my individual tennis lessons would often be at the local tennis club in Penzance, but I would have to go once a week to Ivybridge and once a month to Bath. And I would always have to do that after school. And I think when I think now about parents having to do all the traveling that they're doing now, I don't think it really ever compared to what I had to do. I must admit. But they supported me by doing everything really for me. And I stumbled across a really nice clip the other day on a social media channel of I've got a good friend, Simon Wheatley, and he was talking to somebody about something my dad actually said to him, which I never knew about. But my dad didn't like sport. My dad just didn't like sport at all. But he really enjoyed being taking me to all these tournaments because he thought that that was such valuable time. And I'll send you that clip actually because I think you'll really value it and appreciate it. But my parents supported me by taking me everywhere. So I was really very lucky.
That's fascinating that your father didn't play tennis, because tennis parents are often accused of living out their own dreams vicariously through their children. But clearly, your dad had a really good vision of what other benefits could come from the sport, in addition to just potentially becoming a pro player.
Yeah, I think he had. I mean, he didn't have a like a formal education. Actually, he didn't go to university. He wasn't really a sort of an academic, but he just loved he loved spending time with me and taking me away. And he always used to say to me that that was like a little holiday for him. And he used to think all the parents he met were crazy. And he would watch me and he would never really understand what the score was. Um, and he just liked going to the local pub or to the bar in the hotel and having a drink. Um, so when I look back now, and I mean that clip, I stumbled across it the other day, and somebody said to me, "You've got to put that on social media." And I said, "Oh, I'm not sure if I should or not, but I probably will at some point." But it was a really nice like memory, if you like. But he never actually told me that. He told my friend Simon.
Yeah.
He told my friend about it. But yeah, it's nice actually. He's no longer with us, my dad. So it was like, yeah, that was quite powerful.
Oh, gosh, to have an insight into what his experience of your journey was must have been fascinating. And you mentioned there that
Mm,
you thought it was incredible, really, that you got to where you did in your playing career, given that you were
yeah.
in Cornwall. Um, what sort of a disadvantage was that? Obviously we have parents of players here tonight who might be living in very densely populated areas. I guess they should count their
Mm.
blessings.
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, I had an amazing coach, actually, a starter coach called Keith Songhurst, and he really should be in the Wimbledon box every year for things he's done for British tennis or for tennis. He's still coaching. He's like 85 years of age. I think some people on here may actually have met him. And the tennis club I was at was brilliant as well. So Penzance Tennis Club, I think it still holds a grade three tournament every year. And I couldn't have asked for a more idyllic setting to grow up in. I used to go along there every week. Very little structured tennis. There was always a club night on a Tuesday night, a junior night. It was utter chaos. It was brilliant. It was very, very. You look back now, it's very old fashioned, and everyone looks back and everyone thinks that their childhood is amazing. But now, as a coach, with everything I've done, I look back and I think, wow, yeah, I don't even know how I improved sometimes, to be honest with you, because it was just hit and giggle all the time. It was just hit, giggle. I would go to the club on the weekend. I would play adult after adult in practice sets. I would play a lot of adult league matches as well. But did it disadvantage me as well? I think it did, and I think that to a certain degree only happened or comes through when you grow up because I think, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit as we go on, but I do think there's an element of burnout when you're so young and having to travel so much. And I think one of the questions later on is around um, why some players fall out of the game and some players go on. And I think you couldn't really sustain that level of travel over a long period of time. There were no indoor courts in Cornwall when I was growing up. I think the first centre was built when I was about 12 or 13. And by then I was already sort of going elsewhere. I mean, the first centre was at Bodmin. So that's 50 miles from where I lived. So yeah, it had advantages, but it also had some disadvantages, which probably later on in my sort of journey probably affected me more.
You had an amazingly successful junior career. At what point did you realize that your playing journey wasn't going to lead you to make a living out of tennis?
Well, round about 18, 19, and actually Adam Wolf, who's on this call, would remember that period very well. I was so at 12 years of age, I made the final of the junior nationals. I suppose I was still quite good young. Didn't really do really well. Didn't do that well when I was 14, 15. Took a little while to get back to it, if you like. And then at 18, 16 to 18, I particularly did like started to do very well. I sort of matured. Had a couple of coaches that really believed in me, Nick Brown being one of them, and I sort of just went on this accelerated learning curve or winning streak, where I did particularly well. So, like, I made final of the nationals, 18 and under. I was in several of the British teams. And then you used to be selected, the top four players at 18 would often be selected for something called the Lang squad. So the Lang squad used to be something that was like a big sponsor. And that sponsor would be, it was effectively the Junior Davis Cup team. And that consisted of myself, Martin Lee, um, a guy called Will Herbert, who actually is the physio of Emma Raducanu or Zverev now, and I think it was Arvin Palmer. Yeah, it was Arvin Palmer. And at 18 to 19, you would travel the world, and your your target really was to be like top 250 ATP within 2 years. So that's pretty tough. I mean, that's pretty hard. And then on the first trip with Arvin, I basically tore my patella tendon almost in half. And then at 18, I couldn't walk for 2 years, really. So I had quite a bad injury. And I remember being in Cambridge because that was the National Academy. And yes, we did have national academies before Loughborough. Um, and I remember Adam had actually joined the academy then as well. So I spent a lot of time then, and it was really that period of time that I started to tennis player's life. You know, you sort of ruminate on lots and lots of moments. And I was hundreds and hundreds of miles from home. There was no pathway like there is now where you get support right through to 27, 28 years of age. None of that existed. And I was a realist. I just thought, I can't keep doing this. You know, I can't just sit here and do rehab for 2 years not knowing what's going to happen. So I just started coaching. So I started coaching at like 19/20 years of age. And that was it. I can remember when I had an operation on my knee at that age, and at that time I was fully supported by the Lawn Tennis Association. And I was telling this story to somebody the other day. When I left the hospital, I had to make my own way back home. I had to uh, a taxi was provided for me to like travel back to Cambridge. That was it. I didn't have any. There was no national tennis centre. There was nowhere I could. Nobody was picking me up from the OTA van and taking me back to Roehampton for 6 weeks of rehab. I had to hire a taxi and literally sit in the back of the taxi, or lie down actually, until I got back to Cambridge. So very, very different days.
No,
Mm,
that's really interesting. On one hand, some of that sounds amazing that you had this squad, but then on the other hand, a
mm,
squad that once you weren't a part of, it kind of falls away very quickly, doesn't it? But interestingly,
yeah.
my son started his playing career at the age of 5 and started
Mm,
coaching quite young, blending that in with playing, and even when he was in the States, still coaching. And so one could say that he started his coaching career and therefore his job as it is now at the age of 5, which is quite unusual, isn't it? Not necessarily
yeah.
that he knew he'd chosen that, but you come to the sport as a coach with so much experience from your own playing career and your own program that supported you. So how amazing that you're
Mm.
still here giving back to the sport and working in the sport after all that time as well. Not that it was that long, obviously, but
No, well, it is good, and I echo those thoughts. Really, I think anyone with a son or daughter out there playing tennis now at 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age, it is an apprenticeship. Like you're learning even now at this age, you're learning what it's like to have to travel, go to tournaments, go to competitions, how to evaluate matches, how to interact and talk to each other on the court. So how to train with each other. So you're actually learning even now as all the players have a dream of winning matches and being the best they can, which is fantastic. But you're learning other skills as well.
And on that point, Simon Butler asked a question. A member of our group has asked if there was if you could change one decision in your tennis journey, what would it be? With hindsight now, looking back, is there one thing that you would perhaps have chosen to do differently?
Well, the one thing very easily would be to have gone to America. So I had two offers to go to American college, University of Washington in Seattle and the University of Georgia, and I didn't go. And I didn't go because I had my parents knew nothing. We're much more informed now as parents, or we were. I'm not. I definitely felt we were doing a lot. Well, British tennis was doing a lot more for parents. I think that might have fallen away a little bit recently, but I do feel generally we're a more informed um, tennis parent community. But my parents then knew nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. They would listen to the coaching team and the staff and do whatever they said. And I had those two offers to go to American college, but I didn't take them up because I was part of the Lang international traveling squad. And at 18, if you're going to be funded for the best part of 2, 3 years to travel the world and potentially break into the top 100 in the world, your parents are probably going to take that opportunity and say that's the right thing to do. So that would be the one thing. Um, if I had a second thing that I could throw in there, it would probably be to have spent more time with my parents. I think, I think looking back, and that goes back a little bit to where I was from. It was really hard for me to get back home and see them. Like so, if you think about, I was born in Newlyn and I was based in Cambridge. That's like 10-hour journey. And yeah, so I missed out on quite a bit of sort of time with them. I think my parents only watched me play about 20, sorry, about my parents only watched me play probably twice from the age of 14.
Wow.
That was it. Yeah. And I think I only spent 4 weeks a year with them between 14 and 20
So really, your
years of age.
parenting was almost taken over by the coaching structure around you at that age.
Yeah, I was heavily I was the coaches in my life really looked after me. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you for
So I think
sharing.
that's quite powerful. So
Yeah.
no, 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 it's fine. I think it's really important. I mean, I think this is where, I've always been, well, I suppose some people will class me as a bit of an outsider. I don't really see myself that way, but I've always felt like this, like strong relationship, like with or kinship with parents and particularly players. And I think, parents are struggling to navigate their way through this tennis journey, and the players I work with definitely are. But I think they sort of they can definitely feel, I think, with me, somebody that understands what they're going through, or at least I hope they do.
No, thank you for sharing, and thank you for coming on tonight as well. We obviously don't pay people
No,
to
it's
come
fine.
on as guests to this these Q&As, but and I'd encourage anybody who wants to make
Sure.
any comments or ask any questions, please do add them into the chat this evening as we go along. And broadly speaking, the first half of the questions that are going to follow are going to be about identifying talent, and then later on we'll come on to
Mm,
more about nurturing talent. Um, so perhaps if we look at some of the players that you were involved with, Simon, you've seen talented children
mm.
throughout your career. What stood out to you in some of them, such as, for example, Katie Swan, Jacob Fernley, Emma Raducanu?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually work one to one with Emma Raducanu or Jacob Fernley. I was part of the team that was always making decisions around what those players should be doing, what camps they should be attending. Um, I was involved in some national training camps when those players were within the system. I think when we look at the similarities with those players, they were all good young. I mean, let's be honest about that. They were they were ticking quite a lot of boxes in terms of regional grade three tournaments, national grade two tournaments. The national coaching team were very interested in them. We know that they had supportive parents, and those parents took on slightly different roles. You would have some parents trying to be more coach-like, some parents trying to be more manager-like, just making sure that the players were getting the right number of hours that they needed to have. I think where you see differences is, for example, like with Katie Swan, I still have her reports and her first reports from the National Talent ID days, because we used to do those, we used to run those assessments quite regularly. And she was a very athletic girl, actually. She was very good in hockey, very good runner. And she wasn't necessarily, she was a very quiet girl, very shy girl. She wasn't necessarily a standout performer when it came to going to the National Tennis Centre and showcasing what she had in terms of technical ability. And I remember I debated a very long time about sending her to the National Talent ID assessments. So you can imagine that. That would be quite interesting if I'd never done that. But the reports were never standout reports from her. We used to have this system of PPPs, like player performance potential scores. And so the best score would be like a 7 or a 6 or a 5. And then 3 would be it was a scale of 1 to 7. And 3 would be obviously average. And she would get those sort of scores, like average scores. But she was a very competitive, like I said, she was a competitive girl. She was winning grade threes, and her win-loss ratio in the Southwest region, I remember, was up between 75 and 80%. She was actually very high win ratios in grade twos, but she didn't naturally attract the attention of national coaches. National coaches are often, they're really keen on that kid that comes in and is a little bit brash. And, Jack Draper was like that. He was a little bit, full on and he loved himself a bit. So he would stand out, and he was in your face a bit. But those actual players, Raducanu was quite quiet from what I remember. John Traherne did a lot of work with her in the LTA role, and was really a big fan and supporter of hers. Jacob was very quiet boy, with a very supportive family, as we know, but a very competitive boy. I mean, you can be quiet and you can be well mannered and respectful, but you can also be competitive. And Keita was the same, very quiet girl, just almost robotic in the way that she played. Very, very athletic girl. But I think something that's really interesting with them is they all followed their own path a little bit. So you have the situation with Jacob from quite an early age. He was at Merkenston and in Edinburgh. And with Raducanu, she was down in Kent, living quite near to a school. And Ali Filmer did a lot of work with her. Didn't necessarily follow a prescriptive program. And then with Katie, she was based in Bristol. She didn't regularly tap into Bath, which was the regional player development center at the time. And I always remember when she went to America, people forget she went to America because her father got a job. It wasn't that she went to America because she went to an academy. It was a family decision based around her father. And I think that's quite interesting that she went there. I didn't really expect to see her get to the final of the Australian Open Juniors 4 years later, or 2 years later, actually. But I think in terms of similarities, all competitive, all athletic, all good young, but there is a relative context around that. But slightly different in the ways that they navigated their way through their tennis journey, which I think you can take a lot from that, actually.
You mentioned there the scores from 1 to 7. What sort of
Hmm.
things were the team in those days looking for in their 1 to 7 score sheet?
Well, it's the Likert scale, so it was a scaling system, a management tool. It polarized opinion at the time. Roger Draper brought it in, Stephen Martins brought it in, and I think they were the two most hated men in British tennis. And and it was always the interpretation of what we were doing, which was the emotional, was the reaction, was where the emotion came from. It was always the interpretation of what the system was rather than what the system actually was, which was just to identify and then nurture talent from around the entire country. So there would be 44 talent ID days in every county twice a year. It's like amazing. I don't know if that happens now, but it was the start of a pathway. But there would be it was basically a competency framework, 1 to 7 for technique, forehand, backhand, movement, forehand, backhand, cross court, skills, serve, return, volley, smash. And there would be 3 tiers to it. So you would have it at county level, regional level, and national level. Um, I think it's the type of system. I think if we're in Germany, everybody calls it world class. If we're in Great Britain, everyone goes, yeah, not sure about that. And of course, now everyone thinks Roger Draper's a hero because of all the success that Jack's had, and some of the players that have come through that sort of time of his. There's always a lag with this stuff. I just don't think we're often very patient in our country.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we've got a couple of questions in the chat here, Simon. But I'm going to come back to those if you'll bear with me, guys. Because,
Sure.
I
Yeah,
want
that's
to
fine.
see a little bit more about talent identification before we go on to the nurturing side. A
Mm.
parent's asked, at what maximum age can you tell if a child with physical abilities and talent is going to make a successful career out of tennis?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that one actually. You briefed me on that one, and I had a good look at it and a good think. And I always think with players, it's easier to say. So I've got that stage or age where it's easier to say who isn't going to make it, and then with what's left over, you're never sure. Like you're never too sure. I would say with the 14 plus age is an important age. We've always been pretty good in British tennis at the youngest ages, 10, 11, 12. I've never known us not to win international team events at those ages. We always seem to beat the French. We always seem to beat the Canadians. We always seem to beat the Italians. But I think the 14 plus age is a big age because if you take the RPDC network, you always used to have like 250 kids coming off that at 14. And you think, wow, like that's a lot of kids. And when I was 18, there were only 4 players at the National Academy. And now there's still only 4 players at the National Academy. And you, you sort of wonder if you reflect on it and really think about it, you wonder where all those players go. And personally, I've always felt that first year 14s for the girls is important. First year 16s for the boys is important. I think then you start to get a feel for if those players are really going to sort of kick on. I think that's an important stage for them and an important age. And you tend to get a much deeper understanding of, the players a lot better by then, and you tend to get a much deeper understanding of how far they're potentially going to kick on and go.
So at that stage, you wouldn't be too worried if, say, at a younger age, if they've got gaps in their um, talent identification, if you like, things that can be worked on and developed. Is there anything that's the sort of the golden nugget that you just have to have that can't really be added?
Well, I think coachability is something I talk about a lot, and that starts with being humble and having humility. It's something I actually track here when I work with players now, and it comes from them. Actually, I never ask. Basically, they grade themselves, the players that I work with, on how much they learn, and I think that's a really important quality. So if you take passion being a given and commitment being a given, I think the one thing I'd be really interested in is how keen that player is to learn. And I think that is something that we undervalue, and you're not quite sure how it looks until players get a little bit older, because we know that players find it quite hard to reflect in tennis. They tend to get quite good at it when they're older and they're spending a lot of time on their own and they're traveling, and then they're having to dwell on a lot of ups and downs. But when players are younger and there's so much activity happening, because parents are driving their kids to all these opportunities to train and practice, I've always noticed that players aren't particularly good between those ages of 8 and 14 at actually reflecting and becoming self-aware of actually how they want to improve and how they want to get better. So I think 14 plus becomes actually really important age.
And presumably, then that's a great role for any parent who's wondering how they can support their child at the age of 8, is to help them develop those skills because they perhaps won't be in a position to help them develop a technical skill or even perhaps a physical skill, but they may well be able to help with their mindset. Is that fair?
Yeah, very fair. I think the biggest one of the things I would always urge parents to do if their son or daughter is really keen on tennis and particularly competitive tennis and they want to be a tennis player, I think is to really sit down and really put some detail on what the vision for their tennis is. And there's been a couple of really good studies done on the link between visions and goal setting and goal commitment. And I think that's still something that's really overlooked. When I stand in front of 15 teenage boys here at the school and I'm teaching them, they want to know what my vision is for them. They do, they demand it. And so why should it be any different with a child playing tennis who's 8, 9, or 10? And a lot of parents are adults, and a lot of them work and will have vision documents and statements in their workplace, which in turn should motivate employees and should actually commit employees to actually um, develop the organization, develop themselves. I don't think it should be any different with tennis players. Um, Whenever I look at we always set goals with our players, even when they're young, and it's really interesting listening to the kids what they actually put down for their vision. They're very, very good at putting down, I want to be top 10 or I want to be top 100. It's a lot harder for them to actually come up with goals. Like the goals are difficult for them because it's much more abstract, much more thinking about the here and now, next week, next, 6 months time, a year's time. But the vision that they come out with is really powerful. And that's definitely something that can draw them along. Like Steve Jobs always said, it should pull you. The vision should pull you along. But that's something I would really encourage parents to do. Try to sit down and think about what the vision might be for you and your child on this tennis journey. I think that's pretty key.
It's an interesting one. We had a new chair at our local club, and that they brought a new vision and values for our club, and it was fantastic because it
Mm,
then underpinned a lot of transformation that we underwent as a consequence. Because we could always come back to that vision and values and say, is what we're doing right now within the vision and values? And there's a book called "Will It Make the Boat Go Faster?" and it's a focus on how you achieve Olympic gold in, I think it was rowing. But everything they did
mm,
around that team and everything they were focused on was all about, will it make this boat go faster or not? And I think that's the similar thing, isn't it? Having a really strong vision of what good looks like. And sometimes when a
mm.
child says, I want to take my tennis seriously, we don't really explore what that means to that child. It might just
Yeah.
mean I want to do 2 squads a week, not that I want to be a pro. So sort of understanding in depth is that's a really interesting one for parents to have a go at with their children. Have you got any sort of more tips around how to have that conversation with a child?
Yeah, I mean, I always get them to do it. I have a goal setting document here actually, and I took it from a really good coach educator in Canada called Wade Gilbert, and he's really good. I would recommend it. It's called Coaching Better Every Season, is his book, and it basically starts with it's a very different goal setting form to what I've ever used before because tennis goal setting tends to be quite detail orientated, very detailed heavy. But this is more about putting the player first. So the player actually writes their goals. So they write their vision, they write their 3 goals, and then you have to give feedback on their vision and sorry, not necessarily on their vision, but on their goals. And it's very simple. It's a one pager. Visions can change. I mean, the way you work doesn't tend to change too much. You might add to it and tweak things, but visions can change. But it's quite interesting to hear what the players have got to say first. So I'll give you one really good example. We've got a boy at our school, Dave. he's 16 now. He's called David, and he came to our school when he was 10, and he's from China, and he's a little legend, and he's a very bright boy. And the vision he had was to play tennis until he was 60. That was it. Like to play tennis, like from then I knew, well, okay, that's amazing. Like he just wants to be able to play tennis in 50 years' time. That's fine for me because now I can just say, okay, he wants to have fun. We need to make sure that he maintains his health. We need to make sure that he's actually stretching every day. We need to make sure he's not actually playing too much tennis. Um, and I've still got that. I've still got that goal setting document that he did, and it's really nice. It's really nice actually to look at it now, and I joke with him when I show it to him because he's like, yeah, yeah. But it's true, you know, if you think about setting goals for 50 or 60 years, your goals are going to be very different than if you set them for next year.
Yeah,
And I think that's quite important to remember.
a different attitude towards taking care of your body at a younger age, and perhaps not
Yeah,
stressing it with chasing ranking points and so forth. And I just wondered
yeah.
if there's any players that you've seen in the past that you were really convinced were going to make it, and don't by any means feel you have to name them, but you know, you saw someone who you thought, wow, this is an amazing kid. This talent is really shouting at me, but the child never made it, and I wondered what things get in the way.
So many players, so many players. Um, again, I was thinking I was going to make some notes, and I actually ran out of. Basically, I made a list, and I was thinking, wow, the list just goes on and on and on. And it depends what your definition of making it is. I mean, some of them obviously became world ranked. Some of them are still in the game. Um, did they become household names? No. And there have been some really, really good players, particularly European players, foreign players, international level players, who I thought definitely were going to be on the TV, box office players. And I don't really know. The only thing I can suggest is why they don't make it is it's really, really hard out there. Like we are sort of mollycoddled a little bit in Great Britain because it, it's pretty brutal out there when you leave juniors at 18, um, and you go and start traveling the world and you're trying to break into the men's ATP tour or the WTA tour. There are thousands and thousands of players out there, and they don't care where you've come from, and they don't care really who you are. They don't care about your background in Great Britain. Um, and it's pretty brutal. You have to be very, very resilient. And you know, I think it's got this insidious way of just sneaking up on you, tennis, before you know it. And I think that's where it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about where you're born, how much traveling you have to do. I think a lot of the players that did do well or have done well, I think it's quite important that they are fresh when they're at 17 and 18. And I think it's quite difficult if you're jaded, if you're knackered, if you're fatigued, if you're tired of tennis by 17 and 18, good luck. Like, good luck if you want to go forward with your tennis. And I think that's where the American pathway has become so good over the last. I mean, it was pretty popular when I was young, but not everybody was going to America. And then in the last 10, 15 years, it's exploded again and it's become really popular. And I can understand why. We've always had this cultural thing in Britain that British players tend to be a little bit less streetwise than foreign players. So I think it gives them an opportunity, British players, when they go to America, it just gives them 4 or 5 years where they can delay decision-making process around what they want to do, and they can grow up a little bit. Um, so the only thing I can put it down to is I think players just burn out, that they struggle with the resilient nature of the game. I think having pillars in your life is important. The more pillars you have in your tennis life, like friends, family, education, the healthier you are when you get to that age, which is actually a really important age. 17, 18, 19.
Yeah, Kevin has asked a question about US University. It seems like a good time to pick that one up. I don't know whether you want to
Mm,
mute Kevin and ask that yourself or.
It's I know a couple of players who've gone down that route, and it's refreshing
mm.
for you. I mean, great insights this evening, by the way, and apologies that I keep drinking a bit of red wine as everyone's looking very professional. I'm not.
That's fine.
Um, but it was very. I remember watching Wimbledon this year, and the commentators
Mm,
were discussing about the amount of British players who'd gone down the US college route. And it
mm,
did say exactly what it was really insightful what you said before, that it gave you that time to, if you weren't ready, to not
mm,
try and crash your way into, challenges and ITFs and you just crash and burn. So
mm.
it was more the fact that, is that the right vehicle for someone who, as you said before, at 17 or 18, who's still got that passion, who's still interested, but isn't ready to jump onto the Pro Tour, to take that
Mm.
vehicle if it's available to them.
I say yes. I think it is. I think it's a win-win, and you've got to really you've got to hedge your bets a little bit with um, with your child and making sure that they maximize their tennis and their educational opportunity.
Agreed.
And I think, yeah, and I think again, I go back to that point. I think particularly British boys, we always used to talk about them maturing, and they were always way behind the girls in terms of their maturity level. And it does take the pressure off them having to decide what they do at 18, 19. When I was 18, Kevin, I would have to be top 250 within a year,
That's a lot of pressure,
men's.
isn't it?
Well, that's a lot of pressure, yeah. And if I could have gone to American college for 4 years, which basically is acting like finishing school for the LTA pathway, it would have been brilliant. And I would have come away, I would have got out of the goldfish bowl of British tennis. I would have got out of that sort of mentality of traveling up and down motorways, to tournaments. I would have just got away from it all. Would have got away from my parents. Well, I was away from my parents quite a lot, but I would have got away from my parents a little bit more. Um,
And I think
and
with that whole experience of going to you know, another part of the world, all these different elements,
mm,
it makes you, as you're talking about resilience before, it would make you more resilient. You've got all these different experiences that you're going to process, be part of, and whether you
mm,
go forward with tennis or not, you've still got the ability for an education, and it just seems to be, from what I've picked up, seems to be a great opportunity.
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's tough out there. The American coaches they're gonna take you. You have to win. You have to be
Of
competitive.
course,
You're in a team. I think they do those things really well in America. There's like that culture of success and valuing what you bring. I just think it's a win-win. And the thing I always struggle with when I was at the OTA was I always struggled with those conversations with parents and kids, and a little bit was this happened with Katie Swan a little bit. It was okay, you have to go to the regional centre. And they would go, well, we don't want to because our school's really good. And it was almost like, okay, I struggled with that in the end because I didn't really fully believe it. I thought, okay, you can combine your education, you can keep getting good at tennis, especially in a city like Bristol where you've got about 50 indoor courts around you. You don't have to go over the bath every day. You don't at 17 have to be homeschooled. And yeah, I just thought, yeah, I'm not sure if I can keep having these conversations, actually. It just doesn't sit right with me, especially as I actually value education. And then we do know that there are boys, men on the tour that have gone to college, John Isner, Kevin Anderson, those guys, they went. Hans Shikova was studying chemistry and still actually, top 10 WTA. So we know it can be done. It's just finding the right fit. And I think it's a win-win. And I think when you're young, and when you're investing so much time and money and energy into a sport, I actually think the outcome and the end goal has to be a win-win. You can't get to the age of 21, 22 thinking it was all tennis, and that's it now. It's like there's got to be something more.
No, understood.
It's a really
Yeah.
good question, Kevin. Thank you for that one.
No, thank you for your time. Thank you for that.
Just bringing us back again, just before we move on to nurturing talent, just in terms of identification of talent, Simon, what's your view of the current ranking and
Mm.
rating systems as a measure of a player's talent? Because we often talk about a sort of bit of a rat race of gathering ranking points in order to impress selectors, to impress county, to get into an RPDC, to have experiences through the LTA pathway. And there are various
Mm.
different ways of ranking and rating measurements, both nationally and internationally. What's the relevance of that in your view to a player's talent?
Ranking and rating. Um, I was saying to you earlier, it seems like we have this. I think we seem to have the same conversations all the time for like 25 years. I don't know if look, they are important. It is they're a necessary evil, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. Rankings and ratings exist in every country. ITF rankings, Tennis Europe rankings. We've got a couple of boys this weekend playing at Loughborough. They're all obsessed about getting their ITF ranking. Um, but they don't really measure your development. I mean, your coach is going to measure your development, hopefully. Your own internal systems, as you reflect on your tennis journey, are going to measure your own development. It's just unfortunate that rankings and ratings ultimately, I suppose, are the deciding factor when it comes down to a lot of selections. And that's always a tricky one. So that creates this nature. The nature of the beast is then you chase points and you chase improvements in your rankings. We don't, I suppose, have a value-based system across the country in terms of how we measure players. So, for example, do we pick British tennis teams based on their values, or do we pick British national teams based on who's won the last Grade Two or the nationals? And I think that's when you really have your culture sort of challenged. It's like what you are talking about, does it align with actually what you select? So that's where I think you get a lot of frustration, a lot of stress, and a lot of emotion around chasing ranking and rating points. Look, you do. They are important. They are important. You have to go out. It is a measure. It is another measure of your improvement. It's more of an outcome measure. If I improve my forehand, my backhand, my serve, my physicality, my mentality, that will reflect in my performances on court, and my ranking will improve. But it's just one of many, and I don't think it. I think at different stages of the journey, it is more important than at other stages. So when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, it's not as important as when you're 16, 17, 18. That's what I think about that, really.
Interesting.
It's a tricky one.
Parents often talk about things being unfair, and it's something that's very
Mm.
passionate on our group when people talk about when they feel their child has been prejudiced again in some way. And I guess
Yeah.
to make defensible and transparent decisions in selection processes is much easier if you base it on a data based measurement. And
Mm.
unfortunately, parents are quite demanding of those transparent ways of measuring. But
Yeah.
then again, I think to be fair, in a sport where a lot of people know each other, and perhaps the communication always isn't great about why somebody was picked and somebody wasn't picked. It can seem quite tricky for a parent to navigate that. But yeah, I guess it's getting that balance right from if I'm understanding you right.
Yeah, I mean it's really hard. Look, I've never met a coach ever. I've never met a coach, and even when I was working at the Lawn Tennis Association, nobody is out there hatching plans on how to exclude players from selections. I've never met a coach that does that. It's really, really hard to make selections, and everything gets blown out of proportion. it becomes very emotional because often you associate the money you invest with sometimes a right to be picked or a right to improve. Even at my school here, I have quite a rigid, like we have a very analytical selection process for teams, and um, I pick like I have it for basically I look at attendance, I look at work rate, I look at coachability, I look at the player assessment scores, but I also have a little algorithm for how well players do in competitions. So competitions are important and they are a measure, but I personally don't look at them as winning the competitions for me are not the most important thing. It's playing them, doing well in them. I think at 14 and under, making sure you always play the consolation events, always playing the doubles events if you can, and being a competitive player within those events, within tournaments is important. But for me, it's one element of an eight or a nine stage piece of criteria, really. It is important. I mean, we can't deny it isn't important. It is, but there are other things as well that are equally as important at different stages of a child's journey.
And I guess if you're not picked to play in a county cup squad today because somebody in your county, where you happen to randomly be in a pool of children at
Yeah.
a certain level, if you're not picked today based on the fact that somebody else is winning more than you are today, that doesn't mean the end
Mm.
of your career in tennis by a long shot,
No,
does it?
no, it doesn't. And I think I have sympathy for coaches here because a lot of coaches just do this now because it's easy. It's easier to pick on ranking than anything else. And I think also with parents, I think parents have to really try to support coaches. And this is where, like, coming back to the right way to the top, it's, I think parents have to be really smart with the way that they try to engage with coaches to have better understanding of their selection criteria. Because you've got this like impasse really where coaches don't really want to engage too much in explanations around selection criterias, and then because parents are often quite emotional, can be quite rude, can be quite aggressive. I still remember a selection I made here at the school in my first year here, and after everything I've done in tennis, it really hit me for six. This parent really went for me, and I was like, wow. My boss said to me, "That's the most angry. That's the angriest parent we've had here for since I've been here." And it was very fair, but it wasn't. It was very fair what was my sort of process, but the emotion in the parent was really went over the edge. And I've thought about it all summer. I was like, wow, that I basically thought that's if I had spoken like that to somebody in Costa, I would have been banned, or Starbucks, I would have just been banned. So I think this is a two-way relationship. It's rankings and ratings are unfortunately part of the tennis world. We have to accept it. I think in the coaching world, if you have a really diligent, smart coach, they are they can factor that into a selection criteria, along with other things that are important. But I also think parents have a part to play in this in terms of trying to understand and support coaches with that as well.
Thanks, Simon. I want to move on to the next stage, but just two quick questions that I'm going to put together,
Mm,
if you wouldn't mind
yeah.
just touching on them. How does talent ID in tennis compare to other sports? And in your experience, if you have any in other sports, and also how does GB talent ID in tennis compare to other countries? Presumably, you got involved in some research into that when you were working with the LTA.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've worked with some really good Belgians and Stephen Martins, Karl Mayes, Max de Wilde. They were really smart guys, and they really struggled with the British mentality. Actually, they couldn't quite understand why everybody was so anti the word talent. It's a strange word. It tends to polarize opinion, talent, and particularly talent ID. Some people say you can't do it. Some people say it doesn't exist. Um, I thought we had a really good system then. We just didn't have any patience. And how does how does British tennis compare to other countries? I'm not too sure. I think in the world of tennis, if you look at the Italian model at the moment, it tends to be a lot more around, they've got their culture and their strategy really embedded throughout the entire nation. Um, Tends to be the Americans have done a really good job over the last sort of 8 to 10 years as well with Martin Blackman. I think they've I think they've just looked at it slightly differently in those countries. They've they've come at it from a more strategic perspective and how they get their tournament structure right, how they support players in their clubs in a decentralized way rather than a centralized way. Um, but how does talent ID compare to other sports? The one thing I work with some really good people here at the school. My director of sport is a former Scottish national, international, played for Scotland 50 times, played in 3, 4 World Cups, has a master's in sports science, and he sort of feels you can't sort of do it. He sort of feels talent ID, especially in tennis, is like, you pick far too young in tennis. And in other sports, if we do talent ID, we do it much later. So that seems to be the trend of thought really. Tennis, particularly performance tennis, tends to be very much early specialization, late maturation, but it doesn't fit the academic sort of textbook around talent ID. It's a bit of a abnormally, really. It's quite a strange one.
Yeah, I've heard that said.
I actually.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I actually thought we were doing it very well years ago, and but I think we just weren't very patient with it, really.
Yeah, I was going to say I've heard the people at the LTA now saying that tennis is definitely an early adoption sport, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a late specialization sport. Um, and I might jump ahead and now ask you a question that's a little bit later in the list, but it's relevant to this because parents put a lot of emphasis on their children's ranking to get them into the RPDC long list. If you miss that though, because
Yeah.
your child isn't specialising in the sport, is it too late to make it to the top?
Well, no, no, not at all. I mean, when I was a younger coach, I would have panicked and gone, yes, it is. But no, not at all. I mean, I've been out of the LTA now for a few years, really enjoying what I'm doing, just getting players better, really. But I have heard about this long list and this. I suppose they have a short list as well. Um, I No, I mean, if you miss that long list, no, not at all. No, I mean, yeah, if you've got some, I mean, not everybody is going to be on these lists, and everybody eventually will come off them. That tends to happen, like I said earlier. A lot of players will come off RPDC lists. Happens here in Scotland. Um, you know, and players come off them, but it doesn't mean they're not very good. We had a boy that's come to our school. He was on the long list last year, and he's a hell of a good player, like really good player. I'm looking at him thinking this boy's he's going to go a long way in the game. So I don't really that pyramid narrows very very quickly, and I think it's a difficult one for the federation, that one, but I think they'll be thinking about how they support those players that are coming off pathways quite deeply, I think, going forward. So if you miss the long list, don't worry.
That's probably good for a lot of people to hear because some people perhaps might even
Yeah,
get onto the long list, but not really like the idea of being selected then by an RPDC because having got on the long list, then they can perhaps get selected, but from the RPDC system might select them. But if they are on that list and they decide the RPDC perhaps is a little bit too far away geographically from them, or they've got a really good program where they are. I know the LTA have said that that's okay. You can do that if you've got a good coach near to you and you're comfortable to continue to progress, and you're turning up at tournaments and at other training opportunities, and you're showing that you've made progress. Then there's not only one pathway. So if a parent's
Yeah.
thinking, gosh, we've got this amazing opportunity, we're going to get a discount in an RPDC, my child's going to get level play in that facility, but we're going to have to travel 2.5 hours twice or three times a week to even access that, then maybe it's not the right choice. And it must be very difficult as a parent, thinking you're letting your child down if you don't support that when they've been selected for it. But from what you're saying, there are other ways. There's not just one flavour.
No, of course not. I mean, and we've already sort of touched upon that, even with Jacob Raducanu and Katie Swan. They all sort of followed their own path to a certain degree, and there would have been moments in their lives where they wouldn't have necessarily been top of the tree. And yeah, I mean, there is a lot of pressure on parents because everybody wants to be loved. I mean, let's face it, everyone wants to be loved and everyone wants to feel wanted. And they look at their kids and they see they love tennis and they want to do everything that the LTA asks them to do. And then occasionally, we've all been there. I've been there. In the past, we've had letters. I'm sure Wolfie's had letters. You're not part of this program anymore. And it's like, okay, it's if you love the game, and if you're only playing because you're chasing love of the LTA, you've got a bit of a got to readdress maybe your vision there. Because this game is going to give you a lot more than just what the federation want from you.
Really interesting, really insightful, Simon. Thank you for that. And moving on a little bit
That's right.
then to, we talked a lot about finding talent early on and nurturing it, identifying talent at that stage. A parent's asked if there is a detailed competency framework to measure performance juniors for the whole of their performance journey. Is that written down anywhere?
Mm.
Can anyone access that, or is it even a thing that might exist? Could it exist?
No, I think that there used to be one with the ITF. There used to be a really good ITF manual, but that was mainly technical, tactical, physical, and mental. Um, and I remember it because I used to read it. And each federation may have their own. I don't know where the British one would be, but when we were working with the talent ID team, there would have been one for definitely technique. Um, so I think the best tip I would give there is there is something out there. There will be something out there. I think for each stage of the journey and at different stages of that journey, I think that's probably very too broad. I don't know if that would be actually in existence, but I'm pretty certain that the ITF has some manuals around competency of technique and technique, tactics, psychological development, and physical development, really from the age of, I think it was 5 right through to about 18.
Okay,
So
well,
that is out there somewhere.
there's something called the aspirational standards that the LTA have recently launched at different ages, so that parents can have a look and see. And some of the parents on the group thought, "Wow, that's a lot, right? That's a high level." And when we spoke to
Mm,
Nick Wheel about that, he said, "Well, these are the aspirational standards, and if we're not achieving this." Then you can be sure there's someone in Russia perhaps or Italy who is, and so they've devised those
mm,
standards as a level that is what they feel an international player needs to aspire to, even from the very start. So it's well
mm.
worth people having a look at that on the LTA website as well to go along with the
Yeah,
other ones
and
given.
and the OTA do that stuff really well. I mean, they tend to research things very well like that, and they do have some good information out there. I would just always read it with caution. I would never get too concerned about it. A lot of parents I've met in the past, even coaches who aren't very experienced, they'll read it and it's like suddenly everything has to happen in a certain way, and I wouldn't worry too much about um, every single detail of it. But there is some, if they've got some stuff out there, definitely read it and have a look at it.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk then about nurturing this talent that you're perhaps finding. First of all, a parent's asked, what's your very top tip for an under-8 red ball player?
Good question. Good question. I would go back with, if it was a social player, I would put fun. Everyone says fun, but then I thought, well, I better go a bit deeper than that. I would say fun and learn the game. So be good at the game. Is it going to be um, sort of, if it's going to be a little bit more hit and giggle, which is absolutely fine, um, learn the game as well. So fun and learn the game. If it's a performance player, I would then like look at this serious fun. So the ability to lose within competition. Because I think if you're going to, we know from the players that have gone on a journey and done very well within the game, competition is a similarity that they all have. So you have to try to, you do have to go and compete. And we know in today's modern age where young people are really struggling with their own mental health and their own mental fitness, going on stage and competing is not easy. Um, it's a very emotional place for them. So if you've got an 8 and under red ball player, I would really embrace competition, but you have to learn how to lose within it. And I think that's really important. Um, so I suppose I've given you two tips there. If it's a social player, fun. If it's a performance player or somebody that wants to go on the journey of performance, I would definitely encourage that they learn to lose within competition. Because I have this saying, I stole it from Karl May's, which was tennis players are losers. And we know that statistically you lose more than you win, even if you're in the top 100 in the world. So if if players are going to go out and start competing and expect to win all the time, they have another thing coming. So you have to have that ability to compete and um, lose within competition.
Very good
The
advice.
one thing yeah, the one thing I would say for both of them is study the game. I'm well, many of your listeners will probably remember. I used to love watching tennis matches. I used to study tennis, and I find even with the boys that I coach now, none of them ever watch a tennis match. No, none of them ever. They don't seem to know the game, and I think they've lost that a little bit. Kids growing up, really find that child who's studying the game, who knows the rankings, who's watched the last match from start to finish, not just the highlights reel. I think that for me would be like know the game, respect the history of the game.
I think I took my children to Wimbledon possibly a little bit too young. We were lucky enough to get tickets when they were quite young, but I don't think they really were so engaged with the whole aspect of actually playing the sport. They were more overwhelmed with the environment. But I think the LTA grass court season offers us opportunities up and down the country to watch great standard of tennis. And even if you look
Yeah.
at some of the British Tour events and the other lower level ITF events that happen around the country, 8-year-olds could quite comfortably be in that environment and perhaps watch for a bit, wander around for a bit, come back and
Mm.
concentrate again. So I'd perhaps recommend that too, to the parent that asked that question to
Yeah,
actually,
100%,
yeah, get out there and watch some.
100%, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to talk about what makes a good performance coach and what you would recommend that a parent prioritizes. Because a question that came up
Mm.
on the parent group recently was to do with should I be prioritizing the quality of the coach over the ability of the other players in the squad? So is it better to find level pay or is it better to find a great coach? What's your view on that, Simon?
Is it better to, sorry, I
Is
didn't
it
understand the
better to
question. Sorry, Kay.
prioritize finding a really good coach? Perhaps you've got a choice
Yeah.
of a coach who's based in one club but has squads where the children are very mixed ability, whereas in another club you might find
Okay.
the coach isn't so good
Yeah.
for whatever reason you want to measure that in, but the squad is a very
Mm.
level squad of play and is perhaps going to bring the player on more. Is it possible? Is it? Am I
Mm.
asking you to choose between your children almost to ask you a question like that?
No, no, no. I think there's a really good driver for success that I always remember from years back, which was best players with the best coaches and the best facility equals improvement. Now that sort of, if you don't have the coach, that actually, if you get that right, you'll be amazed how much players improve. But then if the coach isn't, in the opinion of the parent, the best coach, how important is the coach? And I think if you're looking at the coach, I go back really to Louis Kay on this one. I think he sums it up so brilliantly. I think when you're looking at coaches, you can have coaches who inform. So they inform and they pass on education, they pass on knowledge. I suppose we would call it like diary coaching. Then you have coaches who form. And those coaches who form, they're really looking at the performer, they're looking at the physical and the mental ability to actually go out and play matches and have good training standards and be tough on the court, etc. And then you have coaches who transform. And I think those coaches are the ones that you really need to try to seek. And when it comes to transforming, I think that's a lot harder. So you've got coaches there who are much more focused on the long term. And I think that's a really complex thing to do because it's not about going out and just coaching a kid 3 hours a day every day or picking up 50 hours of work a week. It's actually really thinking about that player's ambition, their future. It's tracking their progress. It's holding them to account around the way that they interact with other people. It's their tournament scheduling. It's thinking about that player over a 5 to 8 year period. I don't do a lot of individual lessons, and there's a reason for that. It's different where I work now, but I've never been one to do like hours and hours and hours of individuals. And the reason for that is that I spend so much time off court also working around that player. But the parents and the players don't see that. They never see that work. And I would probably I would hope to be considered more of a transformational coach. I can coach kids one-on-one for an hour, a couple of hours a week. And I can form them in terms of how they compete. But I really want to make sure that over a 5, 6, 7, 8 year period that they become transformed. And so that's what I would be looking for in a coach. Would you prioritize the training environment versus the coach? I mean, I think it comes down to the age of the child. So I think if you're 8 to 12, I think being in I would probably go, you look for the right coach. I think between the ages of 8 and 12, you look for the coach who is going to transform over that period of time. Get the technical fundamentals right. I would even go so far. I know Nick Will's been on here saying one individual a week is enough. I'd probably say at 8 to 10, you need more. I'd probably think you need to have more of the technical fundamentals between 8 and 10. So I'd probably focus more on individual lessons and group lessons. And then when the players get to 13, or let's say 11 or 12 or 13, then they can join the squads where they are in a level playing environment with the coach who might not be as experienced. That's probably what I would be looking at. So when the player is young and new to the game, find the coach, seek the coach that's going to transform over the long term. And that doesn't just mean about coaching them on court to have a nice forehand or a backhand. It's actually instilling some sort of behavioral standards, some expectations in that player. And then over time, they can then start to decide where they go for their training, if they need to go and train with other players of a level where they can hit up or hit down or can push them in a training environment, because they will have that fundamental training from their coach from an early age. So that's probably what I would do. I hope that answers your question. Don't know if I waffled on a bit on that one, but it's a good question.
We asked you for, to tell us what the right way to the top is, and it's great to hear different opinions in tennis. Perhaps there isn't a right way to the top. There's many right ways to the top. It's like climbing Everest. You can go up any maybe more difficult, but you still get to the top perhaps. Viga, would you like to come off
Exactly.
mute and ask your own question? I'll give you a chance to do that, or if you don't, I'm very happy to ask it for you, but we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to join and come off mute. Viga, are you there? Are you able to unmute and ask the question? I'll ask it for her, and she's welcome to join in if she wants to do so. So she says we're in the Beaminster in Dorset. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Where there's very little in the way of tennis culture. My son's 12 and has only just started playing, but it's difficult for him to practice and catch up with his peers. Do you have any advice for where and how he can play, especially in the winter? That's a very local specific question, but perhaps you could answer it if you don't know Dorset well, you could perhaps answer it more broadly in terms of a child who's coming to tennis perhaps a little bit later at the age of 12 and is trying to find
Mm.
somewhere where they belong.
Well, I didn't know the area where she lived actually. I know Dorset quite well. My mum was born there, and it has no motorway, so I know that much. Um, yeah, it's a very rural county. Yeah, I don't know where that area is though, where she lived. I would say in all growing up in the southwest region, Dorset was always very strong, actually. And even when we used to do the analysis around where the best players in the southwest region were coming from, it was always Hampshire, Dorset, and Avon, always those three counties. Surprisingly, Devon was never quite up there for all the indoor facilities they have in Devon. But well, the Dorset County office is at West Hands. So my advice would be maybe to give them a call. I have the number here. I can text you it later. Um, and they tend to run quite a good county training setup in Dorset, probably with Rob Booth still involved there. So, but there are quite a few clubs. I always remember uh, Vicky Avenue, very good club. Southbourne, good club. You had Paul Hanford, good coach down there. So there should be Phil Luce, good friend of mine that is from Dorset. So there should be opportunities for Vega to reach out to somebody within Dorset and actually find out, probably on a more local and relevant level than me right now, where to go.
I wonder if the right solution would be for everybody on a sort of macro level answering this is to talk to the county performance coach in the area,
Mm,
even if your child's not in county squads or if they're too old for the first stages of selection and they're joining in later. Perhaps that county coach would have a view of that, the county office, the county admin,
yeah,
or like you say, maybe the regional player development centre lead might still have a good sense of where the programs are that are feeding into their centre, even if you're too old to join the LPDC as a beginner. And that would be
yeah.
perhaps, yeah, brilliant.
Dorset is it's very rural, Dorset. So yeah, you can be quite away from some centres or clubs at the time.
Okay, so we're coming to the last 10 minutes or so, believe it or not. I'm having such a great time asking all these questions. But let's just see if we can finish off our list. So some parents are paying £70 an hour for individual lessons, and some
Oh, wow.
tournaments are charging £40 to enter. That's without all the extra costs of travel, accommodation. So, we're
Yeah.
talking here about the best way to the top. Is it to sort of take out, remortgage your house? And do you have any tips on the best
Well,
minimizing the financial
well,
outlay?
well, yeah, I do really. I mean, I think I'm amazed £70 an hour for individual lesson. I mean, where's that? Is that in
Well,
London?
it usually rolls in court hire as well nowadays. That's the thing. People are paying for
Oh,
court on top. So that's a sort of doubled up price. But London
shows
area.
you how it shows you how outdated I am. The last time I did an individual lesson was only about probably during COVID. I charged 30 quid.
Yeah, you need to put your price up, Simon, although I'm not
Um,
sure what Edinburgh
yeah,
is like.
I know. I charged 30 quid. I've always had this thing in my, I've always felt like, there was this great quote from James Caan, the actor. He always said garbage men did more for the community than actors. And I've always felt the same with tennis coaching. I feel like, there's other jobs out there that, um, probably a little bit more important than what we do. But yeah, 70 quid an hour. Wow. Um, the business of coaching is very much alive. The yeah, I mean, look, my simple answer for this one would be, I think, you've got to learn to say no. I think focusing, like Steve Jobs again, I go back to that guy. He did a few things, that man, but he came up with a great definition of what focus is, and it's saying no. And we tend to say yes to everything, and planning is quite important because the tournaments are charging. I spoke to a parent recently, and they pay somewhere like 70 quid to enter a tournament. Yeah, I mean, parents are spending so much money. When the blueprint for British tennis was put out back in 2006, it was commissioned by Roger Draper. I think parents were paying something like 13 to 15 grand a year, and that was when their kids were 10. So, and I'm sure that's gone up massively. So I think it's about what you say no to. I think at 12 and under and 14 and under, I think you definitely need to be trying to get your family holidays in. I think they are important. You're not going to regress so much if you are above average tennis player that you are not going to be able to pick up that time when you get back to your training base. So I think what you say no to, family holidays. Do you have to play every tournament that is out there? The answer is no. So there is some discipline involved in that, and maybe some tough conversations with your child about what you do and what you can't play. And it's not easy. I understand that it's not easy, but kids can't have everything they want. That's another thing. I don't really have any tips. I mean, I have recommendations for travel and accommodation. I mean, the one thing I've always thought, we don't really learn from our mistakes, I think, often. And I think not many people I know in the world really. I think the best you can ever do is respect your federation. I don't think anyone, even when I've traveled, nobody ever really loves their federation. But I really would love to see more out of the box thinking when it comes to the tournament calendar within Great Britain. So I think there's a new competition program that's been unveiled. But I would be looking at things like no entry fee for grade threes, no entry fee for grade twos, linking points with sportsmanship at tournaments, because then you'll see a behavioural change in kids around the country. But yeah, I do think there is some collective thinking that can happen around the tournaments and the entry fees, because parents are spending so much money. Regarding the individual coaching, yeah, that's a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money, £70 an hour. Yeah, I don't really know what to say to that, really.
It's tricky.
I hope they're good.
Yeah, yeah, I think it has got a lot to do with court hire costs on top, but yeah, and also the fact that we have a shortage of coaches. I know there's a push by the LTA to recruit about 1,000 more coaches over the next few months, stroke years, and that's because the demand is obviously they've increased the participation in tennis, and therefore it's a time when the coaches can charge for their services. They're sort of in charge of that supply and demand balance, but
Mm.
what a great time for people to think about possibly taking up a career in tennis coaching, since there's such a gap and it's become a career that you
Well,
can
it
actually
is.
have a living from, unlike a lot of other sports.
It's good. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's fantastic. I mean, I must admit, it does seem like everyone's a coach nowadays. So, I mean, I don't know if it seems like we've been churning out coaches for a very long time. I think then you get into that sort of cycle of, okay, what sort of level of coach are you then signing up for? And it goes back to that previous question. It's, if you've got your 8-year-old working with a very new coach, are they going to actually develop their game to a good enough level so that they can then go off and train at county training or regional training? So it's a bit of you've got like a sort of cycle of, a bit of, not a vicious cycle, but you've got to just be careful with not lowering the bar too much, I suppose, with coaches. I think it's a great opportunity for young coaches out there, but if parents are then going to just throw loads of money at cheaper coaches, then the players might not necessarily improve as much as parents may want. Um, but it's a tricky one. I think with the tournaments, yeah, I think this is where you have to look at a little bit of research. How many tournaments do you really need to play? How many matches do you need to play? We know at the age of 9, 10, 40 matches a year is probably about max. So, but learn to say no. That's one thing. It's
Yes,
really difficult.
I must admit, when my
But
son took a whole year out of tennis because of a collapsed bone in his foot, and then came back in at the same level, it did make me think again about all those parties that he'd missed and those trips we didn't take as a family. When someone can take a year
yeah,
out and come back in, admittedly, I think around 14, 15 it was, and pick up and start winning grade threes again almost immediately. So yeah, I mean, you
yeah,
don't forget how to play tennis, and sometimes we do get a bit obsessed with the keeping on the wheel and not perhaps stepping back and
yeah,
realizing you can jump back on again quite easily.
yeah, yeah. I'm always surprised. I mean, there's a few boys that have done quite well this weekend. I'm in Scotland now, obviously, and a few of the boys that do quite well, they don't play loads of tennis. They're playing ITFs this weekend, some of the boys, and they play like 2, 3 times a week, and they're still playing ITFs. So it's amazing what you can. Sometimes less is more. If you've got the passion, if you've got the commitment, if you're coachable, um, then and if there's some focus, you'll be amazed what you can do. Yeah.
Well, Simon, we're coming to the end of our time with you, and it's been absolutely fascinating. So, thank you for all these wonderful answers that you've given to us. But perhaps you could finish off by telling us what it is you're doing at Merchiston. What have you set up there, and how's it all going? And perhaps relate that a little bit to would you recommend that sort of environment for tennis players in the private schools around the both, well, not just in Scotland, obviously England as well, and Wales and so forth? Is that a good way of balancing education? Some parents have spoken about that, saying, that the RPDC's hours are within school time, squads, one-to-ones, they can't get coaches after school. Is the school environment the way forward?
Um, well, I mean, I mentioned earlier a little bit about the conversations I used to have with someone like Katie Swan and her parents, and I always found it very difficult to sort of suggest that kids should be giving up their education in Great Britain, developed country. We're not Russia. We're not somewhere where we give up these opportunities to have a world-class education. So I always found it quite difficult having those conversations. For me, I think it is a really good fit for the culture of British tennis, actually. I think when I was growing up, I used to be regaled of stories of um, Mark Cox, who went to Millfield, Roger Jones went to Millfield, people you probably won't remember actually if you're on this tonight. But um, for me, I think it would have been really good to have had this when I was growing up. There was an opportunity, obviously, but I think we know a lot more about the importance of we know a lot more about tennis and the nature of tennis and how tough it is. We also know that we don't want to give up our education. When I look back now and I think I gave up my education at 16, you think, wow, I actually liked going to school and I liked studying. And I always thought it was just strange that we were being asked to do that. So and then you look at American Uni and what that does, and this prolonging of decision making for boys and girls from Britain. I think it's a really nice opportunity. I love it here at Merkinston. I would recommend every parent go out and look at a school. You always immediately think, oh, money. It's really a lot of money to go to these schools, but there are bursaries, there are scholarships available, and being the type of thinker that I am, I've always thought, why aren't we doing this, or are we going to look at this as a nation? Because I think particularly for kids who are 14 and over, I think it's a really good opportunity to not give up on something, not to compromise with one thing, so you don't actually fulfill your potential in another. So yeah, for me it works. I love being here. It's really nice. I mean, it's like being in a different country. Well, it is a different country, I suppose. And well, I don't want to get too political, but some people, um, I really enjoy it. I look at it as being in Denmark or Norway, slightly detached from England, and Edinburgh is a great city. It's really nice, and we just get to. I've had an opportunity to really bring my vision to life of what we do here, and how we work with the boys, and how we nurture the boys, and how we join up the dots so that we allow county training to take place here in the evenings. And I work with a really good bunch of coaches. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better coaching team in the country. Um, uh, and the support you get from the teachers is amazing. And I think that's probably for me the most important thing. I'm surrounded here by professional educators who really know how to nurture young people. And I think when I look back and I look at some of the RPDCs, sometimes it's probably the wrong way around. It's tennis, and then you just have your fingers crossed that they've got some support from an educational perspective and a child protection perspective, and you have that in a school. So it's a win-win for me.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I think they're very lucky to have you up there, Simon, and what a journey you've had. We really appreciate your time tonight. And I'm just looking, there's one more comment in the chat that I'm going to check. Okay, that was just Viga explaining why she couldn't actually ask her own question, but that's all good. So thank you so much for your time. We've come to the end of our session this evening.
Pleasure.
But please join me, everybody, in thanking Simon for his time, and what some great pieces of advice he's given us on the best way to the top this evening. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Simon.
you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.